So Arayim Tovim, good afternoon. Welcome back. Hopefully you are nourished not only with the sustenance of lunch and of the study of some Jewish text over lunch, but the dialogue that your delegations and your states have had as we get ready in this plenary to move forward in our commitments. So let's reassemble and prepare ourselves for the covenant, the commitments that we're going to make going forward. As we prepare for this plenary, we want to frame and pay tribute to the great Al Vorspan, who we lost this past year, former Vice President of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations and Director of the Commission on Social Action. So we want to take a moment and think about those mentors, those teachers, those guides who brought us to this place, who got us to where we are. Everyone take a moment and think about those people in your own life who guided and inspired you to be where you are today. In my own career in rabbinate, there is no better mentor, friend, teacher, or supporter than Rabbi Ambassador David Saperstein. So let's celebrate David. So people always ask me, what is it like to follow David Saperstein? I mean, that must be really challenging. Oh, really? And I say, but you know what? I have the one thing that nobody else in the world has as David Saperstein's successor. And they look at me like, what is this thing you have? I want one of those. And I say, I have David Saperstein. Because there is no bigger champion, not just for the RAC, not just for the Union for Reform Judaism and the Reform Jewish movement, but for me, than David Saperstein. And I thought it was just me. Turns out there's a lot of people that he mentors and supports. And the last thing that I want to say about David before we invite him to the stage to remember Al, it's just a little footnote of history, but worth amplifying given the panel we had earlier with Matt and Elias and Zoe. 35 years ago, Marla Feldman and Barney Brickner, who were my student assistant rabbi and youth group advisor, asked me when I was a freshman in high school if I wanted to bring our youth group down to Washington to meet this amazing rabbi and learn Judaism and social justice and then go up to Capitol Hill and lobby. And it seemed interesting. So 9 of us went. We sat around the conference table at the RAC, just us and David and Glenn Stein and the RAC staff, and we studied Jewish texts, and we went down to the Hill, and it changed our lives because we realized that we had the power of 5,000 years of Jewish tradition to effect change. Since that group of 9 of us who were in the very first Lita Ken cohort, 60,000 young people have come to the Religious Action Center thanks to David Saperstein. And so David would be the first to tell you that just as I would say to you, I'm here because of David Saperstein, in many ways, David Saperstein is here because of Al Vorspan. And in one last anecdote, when David and I were thinking 4 or 5 years ago about what it might be like if he accepted President Obama's nomination and went and served the State Department and served our country and then was going to be ready to come back as an emeritus, he looked at me and he said, what do you think that might be like for you? And I said, just think Al Vorspan. And he knew exactly what I meant. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend and our teacher, Rabbi Ambassador David Saperstein.
It is fitting that we dedicate this call to action session to Al Vorspan. Nothing would have pleased him more. And so we begin with the remembrance of this beloved giant for justice. Larger than life, Al lived with gusto and laughter and strode across the landscape of American social justice for 3 generations, pursuing a vision of justice, peace, compassion, and decency. Al was the last of the great Jewish social justice titans of the 20th century who shaped Jewish life with its embrace of Tikkun Olam. The polls that have regularly shown for decades that social justice is the most common expression of Jewish identity in America are in no small measure the cumulative impact of Al's storied career. Shaping the agenda, character, and values of our reform movement and beyond, his impact was profound and lasting. Consider his indefatigable efforts throughout the 1950s with Rabbi Eugene Lippman to develop congregational social action committees in every congregation in the country that institutionalized social justice at the local level. We did it first in the Reform movement, and it was copied in the conservative, even in the Orthodox community. His widely used books on social justice, which inculcated social justice awareness and values in generations of Reformed Jews. I cannot convey to you what fun it was to write a book with Al. It took twice as long as it would have with anyone else, because he would regale you with jokes and stories throughout the process. His pivotal role in creating the Religious Action Center. Jonah, he was so proud of how you are leading Iraq, just as he was of Eric Yaffe and Rick Jacobs' remarkable leadership of his beloved Union for Reform Judaism, which he served for so long as its distinguished vice president. His 2 decades teaching classes at HUC-JIR with Rabbi Jerome Davidson, enshrining those values in our seminary and developing knowledge and skills that have greatly enhanced rabbinic leadership on social justice issues. Indeed, we owe the very title of this conference, the Consultation on Conscience, to Al's poetic wit. We were having a beer one day. I said, what should we call the conference without missing a beat? He said, the Consultation on Conscience. So, of course, we spent an hour coming up with other names and came right back to the Consultation on Conscience. And most memorably, his speeches that inspired the movement and spread his social justice message throughout the Jewish community. And boy, could Al Vorspan preach and speak. Inspiring talks, spiced with his jokes and favorite stories. I've often held, and still do, that Al Vorspan was the most eloquent and compelling spokesperson for Jewish social justice of our lifetime. And here, I mean, he surpassed Eisendrath and Schindler, Yaffe and Jacobs, Label Fine, Ruth Messenger, each master social justice speakers in their own right. Only with a radically different and unique style was Elie Wiesel his equal. No biennial convention was complete, nor many a consultation without an electrifying, hilarious, mobilizing Vorspan message. So let this 40-second clip, that's all we have time for. What can you do in 40 seconds? Let this 40-second clip. It is the opening of the RAC video, The RAC Makes a Difference, that we did for our 25th anniversary. It was shown at the 1987 biennial and at the 1987 consultation. Let this give those of you who never heard Al a taste of this wonderful figure and speaker, and those who did, a fond remembrance.
But the task of the Jew, the task of Isaiah, the task of Jews of this generation is to irritate the conscience, to say no even when everyone else is saying okay, to shout, to cry, to speak when injustice festers and human lives are wasted.
get the idea. As Rabbi David Stern said of Al in his moving and eloquent eulogy at Al's funeral, Al was a liberator, not of the poor finally from their poverty, nor of the hungry from their hunger, nor of African Americans finally from the shackles of American racism, though God knows he tried. He was a liberator because he freed the Torah from the ark, the prophets from the quiet pages of bound Bibles, the light of justice from the dainty Ner Tamid. He simply refused to leave the beating heart of Judaism trapped inside stained glass windows or musty halls. He brought Jeremiah to the Capitol, Isaiah to the jail cell in St. Augustine, Micah to the conference room table at the rack, and he did it with a pipe in his teeth and a smile on his face and those expressive hands and his bald head shining like a beacon for social justice. As David concluded, he was brave and smart and eloquent and magnetic beyond measure. My mom used to say, Al Vorspan made social justice sexy. Well, David was so right. Al was many things: a proud American, a passionate liberal, a devoted Jew, an equally passionate Democrat, which in Al's view was the same thing, yet a passionate co-worker with Jewish Republicans who are committed to social justice in their own way, a number of whom are in this room. A gifted writer and consummate storyteller, a courageous and outspoken champion of the downtrodden, the persecuted, the oppressed, a tireless advocate for good government. He was one of America's most courageous voices against McCarthyism, the Vietnam War and apartheid, and more recently, the spirit of xenophobia and white nationalism. Just as he was for Soviet Jewry and for oppressed Jews everywhere, for international peace and human rights, for Israeli and Palestinian peace, for equality for all without regard to race, religion, gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. For all were created in the image of God. He didn't just fight for policies, he lived his belief that the spirit of the divine was in each person. To speak to him face to face, you felt like nothing mattered more to you, to him, than what he was hearing you say at that moment. And he would remember it. He was extraordinary, a great friend, a totally kind human being. Truly, when it came to being a mensch, Al Vorspan was the state of the art. Then there was his joie de vivre, his absolute joy of life, his joke-telling, his good nature, his many kindnesses, a consummately hilarious joke-teller. He could regale and would. He would regale you with stories for hours, laughing uproariously at your jokes, and even harder at his own. Many of you know that Al's idol growing up was his university professor, who became his governor, who became his senator, Hubert Horatio Humphrey. Humphrey's message that the moral test of any nation is what it did for those in the beginning of life, those in the end of life, those in the shadows of life, became the hallmark of Al's political values. Known universally and admiringly as a happy warrior, Humphrey's mark on American liberalism and civil rights was indelible. So let me end with another brief video. This one about Al, not by him. The tribute, a snippet of the tribute video that we did for him when he retired in the mid-90s. The narrator's voice, many of you would pick up without my telling you, is that of Monty Hall, one of the many celebrities who adored Al Vorspan. It is just a short snippet taken towards the end of the video, but it captures Al so well.
But the truly distinctive thing about Al is this: to have fought the battle for justice he's fought all his life, battles in which there have been some magnificent victories, but all too many defeats and stalemates, to have spent one's life making real the dreams of peace and hope and caring, and through it all, to remain so good, so generous, so unbowed, and above all, so full of laughter. Al, you have transformed us with your joy and enthusiasm, taught us to celebrate life, and inspired us with your wondrous determination that your children's children shall know a better world. Al, you are our very own happy warrior.
May Al's name ever be for a blessing.
I join David in wishing that the memory, the righteousness, and the wit of Al Vorspan be an enduring and abiding blessing. As David said, he would be happy to know that we dedicated this plenary, the call to action, in his memory. This is our plenary. No outside speakers. This is the family now, coming back to the mountain, standing again at Sinai, and recovenanting with one another. Are you ready? Yes. All right, so let's make sure that everybody is in the room. If there's a lot of people standing in the back, so if there's spaces near you, just kind of squeeze together. And also, I've been asked to once again remind you, there's 1,200 of us in the room, but there's thousands more that have logged on and are trying to follow along. So what we need you to do is, again, take out your smartphone, go to the Facebook app, but a lot of you apparently put in the RAC. The RAC's Facebook page is the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. So go to the Facebook page, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, go on the live stream and share the live stream. And we're happy to have thousands and thousands of our family that are at home assembling with us virtually online. One person's doing it. Thank you. By the way, my favorite moment when I come to your congregations to speak, I'll be up there and I get going, and then all of a sudden I hear like somebody, it goes on Waze, and they're like, it'll take 17 minutes to get you home from here. And I'm like, could you wait till I'm done before you get directions out? All right. We need directions in. We need directions to come back. Here we go. 2 years ago, thousands of us from across the Reformed Jewish movement assembled here in Washington and virtually online, committed to what we understood was the fierce urgency of now, the moral crisis of our time. Only 6 months had passed since an election campaign that saw unprecedented levels of bigoted rhetoric, demonization of immigrants and refugees, vilification of Muslims, and blatant anti-Semitic tweets and tropes. And we began to see policies proposed that would target LGBTQ students in schools, threaten dreamers in our communities, deny women's control over their bodies, strip health care from countless Americans, and continue the sustained assault on communities of color. But we also understood that the moral crisis of our time did not begin with the 2016 election. Rather, it was exposed during the campaign. Well before the election, we knew that 1 in 3 black men in America go to jail, that mass incarceration is the new Jim Crow, that the evisceration of the Voting Rights Act, our beloved Voting Rights Act written in the RAC's conference room, meant that countless people of color, students, and many others were being systematically disenfranchised from our democracy. And that despite more than 50 years of progress in the movement for civil rights, the killings of Michael Brown and Tamir Rice and Freddie Gray and so many that I can't name them all continue and continue. Racism and racialized inequality persistently haunt our hallowed legacy. Again and again, we heard and continue to hear, even today at this consultation, the call of Jewish people of color who too often experience racism within our own Jewish family, even beyond the dangers of policy and violence. Indeed, Dr. King's voice calls out to us, there is such a thing as being too late. We heard Dr. King call us to account. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. And we heard that call. We assembled at this mountain, the mountain as did our ancestors in ancient days. We heard and we saw the suffering of the most vulnerable and the enduring systems of injustice. And like our ancestors at Sinai, who when offered the covenant embodied in the Torah itself, we responded, Na'aseh v'nishma. All this we will do and we will hear. Say that with me now. Na'aseh v'nishma. All this we will do. All this we will hear. We committed to doing, to acting, to fulfilling our covenant through concrete action to defend the most vulnerable among us. And we committed to continue to keep hearing, to listening, to amplifying the stories, the testimonies of those who were impacted, those who were suffering. And despite the polarized political climate, we responded with a commitment to build power. The power of our people committed to one another. The power of our people committed to being in right relationship across lines of difference. The power of a broad-based grassroots movement to fulfill God's command repeated 36 times in the Torah to love the stranger, not tolerate the stranger, not put up with the stranger, to love the stranger because we were strangers in Egypt. I'm reminded that it is only written one time in Torah that we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, but 36 times we're told to love the person who is other. And so we entered back into that covenant as did our ancestors, and we called it our Brit Olam, an enduring covenant, a covenant to create the world for which we yearn, a world in which all people now experience wholeness and justice and compassion. Now, our Brit Olam wasn't just a bunch of platitudes and ideals. It wasn't even just a little flag you put on your name tag. It was a living document serving to hold ourselves accountable, to truly show up, to protect the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, to be an allyship across lines of difference, to get proximate to people who are impacted by the crisis, to be with undocumented folks, to be with people in prison, to be communities of sacred dialogue, even in a climate of polarization, to listen and hear from people who disagree with us and amplify voices even when they are in dissent. And this movement showed up. We fulfilled the covenant. Over these last 2 years, more than 200 congregations have fulfilled the Brit Olam. Let's celebrate that. Under the banner of the Urgency of Now campaigns, Reformed congregations, many represented here with us today, demanded racial equity from local law enforcement and helped pass federal criminal justice reform. You opened your synagogues and provided sanctuary to undocumented people, and you stood with dreamers at risk of deportation. You welcomed refugee families into your congregations. You secured protections for trans students in schools, and you helped save the Affordable Care Act. And as we pivoted to the 2018 elections, through nonpartisan, 501c3 appropriate civic engagement, ballot initiatives, candidate forums, we helped achieve the reenfranchisement of 1.4 million Floridians who were formerly incarcerated. And Where's my Massachusetts delegation? You all made history when you passed a ballot initiative that brought trans equality to Massachusetts, which will become a template for the rest of these United States. And congregations across our movement held candidate forums, holding those who would hold elected office accountable to our values and to our positions. And our students. Thank God for our students, our young leaders who mobilized a massive voter registration push to finally end the plague of gun violence in our country. And when you see the statistics and people think, oh, there was an uptick in young voting from 22% in earlier elections to 30%, that didn't just happen. Our students organized that. So let's celebrate our students. All in all, this movement made history. Together, our congregations mobilized and engaged 158,000 voters in the 2018 election. Now, despite the progress that we made, and there were a lot of victories along the way in the last 2 years, it has been a very hard 2 years, has it not? Two years ago when we gathered, though there had already been mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting and gun violence impacting inner city communities of color, Parkland was, for many of us and for some of our young people, the galvanizing wake-up call that my generation had failed them. Our movement is no stranger to youth activism, but the depth and breadth of our student leadership was astounding. As a result of seeing, once again, their peers gunned down while trying to get an education, they mobilized this movement. And there were other setbacks in the last 2 years, other assaults on our Brit Olam, our enduring covenant, even beyond the ongoing attempts to pass policies that were xenophobic and rooted in bigotry and misogyny. Charlottesville. Tiki torch-bearing, assault rifle-toting goons threatening a Reform synagogue and chanting, "Jews will not replace us." How long, we wondered, before the white supremacists and the white nationalists opened fire in our own Jewish family? And then came Pittsburgh, where the threat of white supremacy and anti-Semitism was made even more real, even more tragic, violent, and murderous. Another mass shooting with an assault rifle. A synagogue targeted for its affiliation with HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and its commitment to refugees. And it came just days after 2 black people were shot in a Kroger supermarket and murdered because the racist murderer couldn't get into the church that he was targeting because it was locked. And it was locked because of Mother Emanuel, which had been targeted years before, losing 9 innocents who were murdered at the hands of a racist murderer. And Christchurch, and New Zealand, and Poway, the Chabad House, and Sri Lanka, and so many others that break our hearts. We have endured and we have survived this fierce urgency of now because we have held one another. We have loved one another and supported one another within our congregations and across lines of difference as our Muslim family and our Christian family and our whole human family have come together to live and breathe our sacred covenant. It has proven to us that change is possible, that resistance to injustice is always possible, and that we can overturn the bigoted policies and protect the vulnerable communities among us. Each one of us can probably point to a particular poignant moment of resilience from the last 2 years. For me, it was on the floor of the Senate Russell Building Rotunda, and Cantor Boxt is going to help me relive that moment. Thank you. You can celebrate Cantor Boxt, and you can celebrate this moment. Hundreds of Jewish leaders that were organized by Bend the Arc and the Rack from across the United States gathered to join hundreds of DACA recipients. Elias Rosenfeld was there and his network of Dreamer activists. Together, we were there to demand the passage of the DREAM Act. We sat down on the floor of the United States Senate and we began to sing the song of the sea that our ancestors sang after the sea parted, the ancient psalm that they sang in praise of their liberation from the bondage of Egyptian slavery. Ozi, Zimrat Yah, Vayhi Yeshua. Over and over again we sang, my strength comes from the song of my God. My salvation, it will come. Zimrat Yah, Vayhi Yeshua. Ozi, Zimrat Yah, Vayhi Yeshua. Ozi, Zimrat Yah. Now, the Capitol Police informed us it is prohibited from singing on the floor of the United States Senate. We informed the Capitol Police that we would stop singing when the Senate passed the DREAM Act and brought protection to our Dreamer family. That is, by the way, KB Frazier, Koach Baruch Frazier, who is a trans black Jew. And KB put KB's body on the line. And we understood, at least those of us who were white Ashkenazic Jews, to be incarcerated meant something different than it might mean for KB Frazier. And as we were taken into custody, we looked up at the Rotunda Gallery and we saw hundreds and hundreds of dreamers. They couldn't be on the floor with us because if they had been incarcerated, they would have been deported. So they stayed up in the rotunda and they had their fists in the air. And they sang to us in Hebrew, Ozi v'zimrat Yah, Vayhi Yeshua. Now you know how the story ends, at least this chapter. We have not yet won the passage of a clean DREAM Act, have we? But are we going to keep singing? Yes. And are we going to keep acting? Yes. We are going to sing and act and sing until our salvation from all this injustice and all this oppression will finally come. So today, here we are again assembled at the mountain, ready to renew our Brit Olam, our enduring covenant. Naaseh by doing, and we have been acting. V'nishma by listening, by hearing the stories of the experiences and the resistance to the injustice that surround us. In preparation for today, we did something pretty gutsy and historic for the Reformed Jewish movement. We had a movement-wide listening campaign. Some people, we were nervous to call it that. Liz Dunst made me call it an engagement campaign, right? So can we celebrate Liz Dunst, the chair of the commission? Yeah. I want you to know I'm the community organizer. I was Mr. Just Congregations, but after the last election, when we were trying to figure out what are we going to do next, Liz came to me and said, you know, Jonah, what we really need to do? We need to get back to our congregations and do a listening campaign and hear from them, like what they really care about and what they want to work on next. But then she said, but let's call it an engagement campaign, because then they'll do it. Well, we had more than 1,000 conversations across this movement. Let's celebrate that. Many of you in this room and folks online hosted these conversations to surface not just the passions and not just the issues you care about, but to actually tell the stories of injustice, the way we are impacted in our communities and our networks, and then to make decisions and commitments. And we all got an opportunity to have those conversations again at lunch today, to ground our Brit Olam in our recommitment to what's next, in the actual stories of our commitments and our experiences. And we amplified some of those stories on the plenary stage. You heard Zoe Turner tell the story of what it's like to be living among peers who are enduring active shooter drills and the plague of mass shootings. We heard directly from Elias Rosenfeld, who is impacted by the crisis in our immigration policy. Just next door, we heard the actual stories of Jews of color who were impacted daily by racism. We were given voice by the women of Reform Judaism who lifted up the cry as state after state after state is rolling back the rights of women to control their reproductive health care choices. All across our movements, we have been hearing the stories as people have told them. We've been hearing at a grassroots level about climate change, congregations that worry that their communities will literally be washed out. All those stories collectively add up to a cry for our very redemption. So how do we respond to that collective cry? The same way we did at Sinai 5,000 years ago and the same way we did 2 years ago, by recommitting to one another, by recovenanting with our congregations and our communities, by recommitting to reach across lines of faith and difference, remembering that when we launched that first Brit Olam, it wasn't new. It was just an iteration of that which was ancient and has held us accountable since we stood at Sinai. And just as we are asking your congregation and community, whether you're in the room today or you're following on the live stream, to renew your collective commitment to the Brit Olam, we are renewing our covenant to one another as a movement. Through these conversations, we have identified our core issues, and we are going to work on those issues and the other issues that continue to surface as networks of congregations commit to one another to work on immigrant justice, gun violence prevention, climate justice, racial justice, and reproductive health care. But in order to hold each other accountable, to actually hear from one another and then to act on a local level, to collectively act and organize on a state level, and ultimately to leverage our collective power to make change on a federal level, we need to renew and recovenant through our Brit Olam. If we go back to our congregations and our communities with the Brit Olam, it gives us the tool to engage in a congregation or community-wide conversation about what we are prepared to actually say we're going to do, and then be able to measure, did we actually do what we committed to do? We will invite you to join cohorts, networks of congregations and communities that are working on these issues, so that you can either act collectively where it makes sense on a state, local, or federal level, or just learn from one another and figure out how to support one another. We'll ground the cohorts in Jewish texts and tradition so that we can give each other spiritual resilience and teach one another the enduring Jewish values that guide our work, which is the source of our authenticity. And we'll also offer skills training and other resources as you move to collective action. Now, as you're thinking about the cohorts that you and your community will be part of, some of you are probably actually thinking, but if I'm part of RAC, Ohio, what does this mean for me? Where's RAC, Ohio? Are you in the room? What about RAC, Illinois? Okay, what about RAC, Texas? And RAC, New York? Is RAC, New York here? And RAC, California? Okay. All of you will figure out ways to align your cohort work with your state work. And because I love all my states and provinces equally, where are my Florida people? Where's my New Jersey people? Who's next? Rack, Florida, or Rack, New York? Where's my Iowa people? Okay, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. You could be next. You could be next. Rack, Alabama. Actually, what we really need right now is Rack, Alabama. Throughout the next year, in our cohorts, in our states, we'll be organizing and acting on these issues as we did during the urgency of now, and then as we did in the 2018 election. A year from now, all of our issue work will stream back into the most massive 501c3 appropriate civic engagement campaign in reform movement history. But it all starts with the Brit Olam. Okay, people, if you are already a Brit Olam conversation, will you make your voice heard or wave your hands? Okay. If you are not yet a Brit Olam congregation, but you are going to be one, let's hear from you. Make some noise, wave your hands. All right. Do you have a commitment card somewhere? This is not one, this is my script, I promise. It does not look like this. Okay. We are asking you to make a commitment, not as an individual, but as an individual representing your team, your delegation. That community of people that is going to go back to your congregation and bring them into the work, into the cohort. Okay, if it's part of state work, if it's part of issue cohort work, let's start to wait. If you've got a commitment card and it's filled out, raise it up high so we can see. Let's start to pass those to the aisle. And I want to ask you to make sure that as you commit to us today, you're going to join us again on June 10th. Everybody say June 10th.
June 10th.
Because on June 10th, we are going to have another virtual town hall launch. When you all launched the Civic Engagement Campaign, Zoom almost crashed because thousands of you logged on. So we're going to need thousands of you to log on again, and we're going to start by launching our massive cohort Brit Olam renewal campaign. So let's pass those out, and let's take another breath. And Cantor Box is going to strum underneath this next little bit here because I'm going to get all spiritual again. All right, Cantor Box?
I'm ready for you.
All right.
I'm always ready for spiritual.
Because I want to ask you to close this call to action with a moment of prayer. So will you join me in some prayerfulness? Take a breath. And as Rabbi Elaine Zecher, my teacher, likes to say, keep breathing. Beats the alternative. And appreciate the people in your network, the congregation, the team, the delegation you came with whom you are committing. Appreciate the wider community of people among you, from your community, from your state. Take a moment, look around, and appreciate those assembled at this mountain with you, who've made this commitment to be in this with you, who find resilience and inspiration with you. And hold in this moment not only all those 2 million souls who call themselves Reformed Jews who are with us at this mountain, but think about all of our allies, all of our friends, all of our partners, those in the mosques, in the churches, in the advocacy organizations, in the community organizations who are yearning to stand with us at that mountain. And let us hear the voice of our scripture. It is written in Exodus 19:4. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you up to me. Now then, if you obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be a treasured possession among all the peoples. Indeed, all the earth is mine. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. God of our mothers and God of our fathers, God who inspired the Hebrew midwives, Shifra and Puah, God who inspired Miriam and Yocheved and even Pharaoh's daughter who resisted Pharaoh's genocidal decree, God of Moses and Aaron who led the people out of the shackles of oppression, God of all those who assembled at the mountain and back in ancient days said, all this we will do and we will hear, and committed to being a kingdom of priests. Challenge us, God. Help us. Inspire us. Because we've got to be a holy nation. Oziv Zimratya, Vayhili Yeshua, with faith in the power of redemption, with strength from the song we sing together. Oziv Zimratya, Vayhili Yeshua, God give us strength. As we sing our collective song, let this be the song of our salvation with an end to all injustice and all oppression for all your creation. Kain Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will.
Oziv Zimratya.
Stand with us now, if you're able.
We're going to learn together a song of action and advocacy, so stay where you are. This is a song I learned from a gathering called The Music of the March, which is a part of the Poor People's Campaign. This organization was led in part by Yara Allen, who is the director of theomusicology, which I just think is fascinating. Theomusicology and cultural arts for the repairers of the breach. Now, she built this song when she was with a community who discovered that the energy company was pouring coal ash into the water, which was mostly accessed by poor Black and brown and poor white communities. And when she heard story after story of this tragedy, she created this song. So I offer it humbly for all of those who are using their voices and their spirits to call out injustice. So when I sing, somebody's hurt my brother and it's gone on, you'll sing, that's right. I'll go get some coffee. Far too long. You got it again. So I'll sing, somebody's hurt my brother and it's gone on far too. I'll sing, yes, it's gone on. You'll sing, far too long. There's Fred. And I'll sing, tell me it's gone on far too. And then the last time I'll sing again, somebody's hurting my brother and it's gone on far too. But then we'll sing together and we won't be silent anymore. So let's try it again. Somebody's hurt my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too. Oh, somebody's hurt my brother, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurt my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too. Somebody's hurt my sister, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's poisoned my water, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too. Somebody's poisoning our water, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Okay, what else? What else is happening? Somebody's doing what?
Somebody's taking our vote, y'all, and it's
Taking, wait, I want to be able to all sing it. What is it?
taking our vote, y'all.
Our vote? Our vote, y'all. Okay. Somebody's taking our vote, y'all. Somebody's taking our vote, y'all. And it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Tell you it's gone on far too. Somebody's taking our vote, y'all. And it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. What else? What else is happening? Taking our choice? Somebody's taking our choice now. Somebody's taking our choice now. And it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on. I tell you it's gone on. Oh, somebody's taking our choice now. And it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. What other injustice? Children? What's happening to our children? Shooting. Somebody's shooting our children, and it's gone on. Yes, it's gone on. I tell you it's gone on. Somebody's shooting our children, and it's gone on. And we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody's hurting our brothers, and it's gone on. Yes, it's gone on too long. Tell you it's gone on. Somebody's hurting our brothers, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
That is a tough act to follow. For 15 years, I had the most terrific job as the RAC's legislative director. Yes, I got to help represent the reform movement on Capitol Hill, but even more fun, I got to spend every day working with and learning from the incredible RAC legislative assistants. In fact, we have a whole bunch of former RAC legislative assistants in our audience today, which is fantastic. If you're not familiar with the Legislative Assistant Program, it's a one-year post-college fellowship where 6 or 7 extraordinary people come and spend the year working with us at the RAC and being our movement's advocates, and representatives on all the justice issues that we work on. So when it came time a few years ago for us to look for a new legislative director, it made sense that the right person was herself a former legislative assistant at the RAC. And for the last 2 years, Allison Grossman has been an incredible part of the RAC team, guiding a new generation of legislative assistants and strengthening the reform movement's presence